This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Eben Janssen. This show is live. It's broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We are also streaming live on YouTube right now, where the whole show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Today we look at the reaction to the presidential question and answer session in Parliament yesterday. Is the South African economy facing another crippling strike season? We ask what needs to happen to avoid this. Then, nearly 60% of our country's credit-active consumers are well over indebted, says the Human Rights Commission. What does that mean to the economy is a question we'll ask today. Later, we look at a recent Bloomberg report that makes South Africa the second most stressed society on the planet. What do you think of that? And we close with an international long driving test match that starts in Johannesburg tomorrow. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines. The presidency has submitted an additional date to the Office of the Speaker for the President to answer oral questions in the National Assembly. During question time yesterday, members of Parliament asked the Speaker to obtain an additional date for President Jacob Zuma to answer oral questions. Opposition parties complained during yesterday's session that the President's last appearance in the National Assembly was August 21 and that a lot of questions from that session remain unanswered. Presidential spokesperson Mac Maharaj says several dates were already provided and the 3rd of November was an additional date. President Zuma finally directly responded to the EFF demand that he pay back a portion of money spent on non-security upgrades to his Nkandla residence.
There's no money that I'm going to be paying back without a determination by those who are authorized to do so as recommended by the public protector.
Musicians, family and friends eulogized slain rap artist Nkululeko Flabba in a moving ceremony yesterday. They spoke of how he had touched their lives, describing him as funny, authentic and caring. The memorial service was held in Johannesburg. Flabba will be laid to rest on Sunday.
We have lost a son. The kids have lost a dad. The kids have lost an uncle. Ebabomncane. Upodi has lost a hubby. We've lost a brother. The squatter boys have lost a brother.
I don't know what to say, man. It's Okay, I'll be strong, man. Gangster. Ooh.
Firefighters have been keeping a close watch overnight on the blaze in the mountains near Stellenbosch in the Boland Cape. Nature's Justin Lawrence says high winds fanned the blaze that broke out at the weekend. It's left more than 3,000 hectares of vegetation ravaged, causing the Yonkeshoek Nature Reserve to be closed. Gauteng police have issued a reward of up to 100,000 rand for any information that could lead to the arrest of suspects who mugged an SABC crew on the Barry Hertzog Avenue Bridge overlooking Johannesburg's Mill Park Hospital on Tuesday night. SABC contributing editor William Voko, foreign editor Sophie Mokoena and journalist Griselda Lewis were preparing for a live crossing after covering the arrival of Zambian President Edgar Lungu, who is at the hospital for medical treatment. They were robbed of cell phones, laptops and other broadcast equipment. And just a quick update from the Cricket World Cup, where South Africa are playing their final Pool B match against the United Arab Emirates. South Africa, who were inserted by the opposition, they ended on 341 for the loss of 6 wickets, with A.B. de Villiers scoring 99 before being caught on that unlucky number. I can tell you that the UAE, they've started their reply, and at the moment they are 92 for the loss of 3 wickets, and that is in the 27th over, so the going's quite slow. And the South Africans, well, they seem to be well on top and en route to a victory that will see them face Sri Lanka, it seems, in the quarterfinals. That match will be played at the Sydney Cricket Ground next week. Now, it was a heated question and answer session with President Jacob Zuma in Parliament yesterday. After a protracted disagreement on questions, the Q&A finally went ahead.
After a delay of over an hour where the president should continue where he had left off last August, the session finally got underway. The pending question then was when he would pay back a portion of the money spent on non-security upgrades at his private home. Musimaimane demanded to know when the president would set a date in Parliament to answer the question.
I never told Parliament. It's not true. This is what we have fed the country. On an untruth, I was here answering questions. I was interrupted, and I couldn't proceed. The fact that there were questions that were left unanswered is not my responsibility. I was here to answer questions. It's the responsibility of your members in this Parliament. That's what I'm saying. And I've therefore said, answering the question directly, once Parliament takes the decision, I've never refused to come to Parliament. You take the decision anytime, whether it's tomorrow or any other day, to say you are required to come hear the questions, I will be here.
The president then responded to MPs wanting answers on Ngandla.
I've ever thought on the date when I will pay back the money. Firstly, there's no money that I'm going to be paying back without a determination by those who are authorized to do so as recommended by the public protector. When you ask this question, you were in fact moving ahead of the parliamentary process which was dealing with that very issue. And I said so on that day.
The president also answered a question on the state of security agencies.
I've never interfered with any institutions, and I will never do so. And secondly, I have no case against me. The NPA dropped the case, not influenced by me, on its own accord.
The president also gave an update on Operation Phakisa, a model which seeks to expedite service delivery and implementation. Mzondile Mbej, SABC News, Parliament.
The presidency has, of course, submitted the 3rd of November as the additional date for President Zuma to answer outstanding oral questions in the National Assembly. Now, from Parliament, we are joined this morning by our parliamentary reporter, Lukhanyo Talata, and then the presidential correspondent, Mzondile Mbej, is with him. A very good morning to you, Lukhanyo. A heated day in Parliament, wasn't it?
Yes, good morning. Heated indeed, but I think it was a little bit of a letdown for people who were expecting a repeat of what happened on 21st August. And I think to a very large extent, Parliament was returned to normal service yesterday, which a number of South Africans, I mean, I was speaking to some people just this morning, a number of South Africans saying that is the kind of Parliament that they want to see. But I'm not here alone, Eben, as you've pointed out. I'm joined this morning by political analyst Wahid Patel, as well as political correspondent, presidential correspondent Mzondile Mbej, to talk a little bit about what happened yesterday. And I'd like to bring in Mr. Patel in here first. Mr. Patel, good morning, first of all. On the way in this morning, I spoke to a senior opposition MP, and his opinion on yesterday was that it was round 2 to the president. Do you agree?
I do agree. I think there is a concerted attempt by the president to, when he is in the podium, given the ruptures that took place last year, when he was unable to complete the question and answer session, when he legitimately had the podium and an opportunity to direct the debate and the narrative, clearly wasn't able to do so because of the fracas that took place in the House. And if we look at his performance since the State of the Nation address, where he was clearly unfazed by the walkout by the opposition and their removal from the National Assembly, where in the debate of the State of the Nation address, he spoke at length, ad nauseum, off the cuff, around a particular narrative. And that continued yesterday. And I think this is a concerted attempt by the president when he is on the podium to ensure that he directs the narrative, but also shifts the narrative away from the issues that opposition political parties want to dominate the agenda and to get his point of view across. So I think definitely round 2 to the president.
All right, so let me bring in Mzondile. Mzondile, you know the president. You've traveled the world with him. What did you make of his demeanor yesterday when he was at the podium?
You know, Lukhanyo, if you look at the manner in which he was answering those questions, he was very authoritative. He was very authoritative. You know, one of the reasons he is doing what he is doing, because there's been this kind of information that the president runs away from parliament, that the president doesn't want to take accountability of anything. So if you look at what he did yesterday, he's that kind of a person. You know, he's a very friendly person in terms of his general outlook. And I think many people would mistake that to mean that, well, maybe he's not serious. But when he gets the opportunity to be able to say what he needs to say, what needs to be said to the nation, that's how he comes across. He's very authoritative. If you see what he was doing yesterday, to say, you can't just say things about me and then things that are not true. Here I am. Let me show you that what I'm doing, I know what I'm doing. I think he wanted to portray that image to South Africans. I'm the #1 citizen of this country, and here is my account to the nation.
All right. Let me come back to Mr. Patel. He finally then did answer the question, the burning question on when he's going to eventually pay back money on Nkandla. He said that there needs to be a determination made by those authorized by the public protector, and then once he's then given an amount, chances are he will pay that money. The implications of the president saying that he will pay back money that is due.
Two things. I think there's a point that we may be missing before the issue of his comments yesterday. Not only did he deal with the issue, he's also dealt with the issue on his own terms. And I think politically that's important, given what we've just heard Mazwandile say about how authoritative he's trying to be when he's at the podium. The issue here is those questions that were standing over from last year were not on the order paper yesterday. And they were never going to be on the order paper, and they weren't going to be added to the order paper if you look at the speaker's opening remarks. But what he did was he said, yes, it's not on the order paper, but you know what? I'm going to deal with it. And in that way, he dealt with it on his own terms, in a way, stealing the thunder out of the opposition, but also, in a sense, reclaiming some moral high ground to say, I'm not going to run away from the issue. I have not run away from the issue. I'm not running away from the issue. And it's not up for debate today, but for the record, here's what I think. So I think that's the first point. Whether that is going to get him mileage beyond card-carrying members of the ANC and the ordinary South African, I think time will tell. But I think the general consensus is, to some degree, he's dealt with the issue. The other issue that now arises is the narrative clearly now shifting away from will you pay back the money or won't you pay back the money to a different issue, which is there's a public protector's recommendation, there's an investigation by the executive under the auspices of the Minister of Police, and Parliament ultimately is the institution to which the public protector reports, but Parliament is also responsible for oversight of the executive. And how now does Parliament reconcile this role? Because clearly the issue isn't anymore about the President responding to the questions. It is, where do these two processes lead to? And if it leads to a firm outcome that, let's say, the President should pay back money, how is Parliament going to exert its authority over the President being held account in that regard? So I think we may be getting into even murkier water than we were before. As before it was just about him answering the question. Now there are two institutional processes that need to be concluded at some point, and it needs to have an outcome. And if the outcome is that yes, he should pay back the money, then a commitment will need to be made.
All right. I'm not sure if we do have time, but very quickly, Mzwandile, the president yesterday, you were saying, was very authoritative. Is this, and as Mr. Patel was saying earlier on, it seems to be a general trend that we are now seeing from the president. Where do you think it comes from?
Let me just add, I think, on what Wahid is saying. The very same last night, the president submitted the additional date for the oral questions. There were already the dates, 3 dates. So he submitted the additional date. So he's basically saying this fallacy of saying I don't want to be held accountable is wrong. So to prove that, I'm ready to do even more before you can even, today there's programs committee that is to decide on the date. He has just actually given them the date. So he is, as Wahid was saying, he wants to be in charge of the narrative in this country.
All right. Gentlemen, I thank you both for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Eben, that's it from us in Parliament, discussing obviously what happened in the National Assembly yesterday. Over to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Lucanio Kalata, giving us the reaction after the presidential Q&A in Parliament yesterday. Just a quick update. The UAE 106 for the loss of 3 wickets, chasing 342, and it's in the 30th over. So it should be almost impossible from that position for them to go on and beat South Africa. But let's move on and take a look now at your tweets with regards to what happened in Parliament yesterday. Olwetu Sipuka says, President Zuma made the majority of South Africans happy with his Zuma Q&A. Chiefs had to make the minority happy in the Absa Premier League. Of course, the train stopped at Maritzburg Station last night. Sorry, Amakosi, sorry. Gina says, Buthelezi is a true father in the Parliament. Yes, that is the figure that's emerged as the father and statesman is Buthelezi. Busisizwe Gasa says, pay back the money has been answered with how much? Zuma Q&A. That one from Busisiwe. Mdladla says, interesting how the haters of Zuma have despaired so much about getting rid of him. They're asking Ramaphosa to lead a revolt. Against what? I asked. That one from Mdladla. Those were some of your views. Keep it coming at SABC Newsroom. We love that kind of interaction. We love to hear your views. We love to hear your views. We love your pictures, especially now. The picture of the day, that comes from Bianca Fernandez, and it's got to do with the fires in Stellenbosch. Jonkershoek up in flames last night, spreading into Kutsenberg. Evacuations taking place at Stellenbosch University. It's an area that I could know very, very well. That's where I grew up, in those mountains. I walked many, many a times in my youth. But let's take a look now at the front pages from around the world. In Canada, the Ottawa Citizen reports in a damning indictment with Canada's military police detective. A federal report issued Tuesday says there were serious flaws in the investigations of the suicide of Afghanistan war veteran Stuart Langridge, with poorly supervised officers seemingly unable to cope with even basic policing techniques. Then we move to Israel. The Jerusalem Post pleads with in Israel, security will be at great risk if Zionist Union leaders Isaac Herzog and Tzipi Livni form the next government. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned, speaking at his Jerusalem residence following polls that indicated a growing lead for the Zionist Union. He said a loss by the Likud would mean that on both the Iranian and Palestinian fronts, the country's policy would change completely to one of weakness. And on mainland Europe, the Times reports that the scale of the crisis that is engulfing children's mental health is revealed today, with official data showing that a record number of youngsters are being admitted to hospital for self-harm, eating disorders, depression, and other psychological disorders. That is a really worrying trend, isn't it? Let's now take a look at what's happening across our country in South Africa. This is our diary today in the Johannesburg High Court, sitting in Palm Ridge, where the trial of Lindri Kaku is expected to resume. Kaku is on trial for 18 charges, including the killing of 3-year-old Luke Tibbets. Now, we stay in Johannesburg. The Constitutional Court is set to hear an application for leave to appeal against the High Court ruling relating to the Eastern Cape Liquor Act. And in the Durban Regional Court, the trial of Dr. Genshin Rugnath, his wife and 3 others are expected to appear on charges of prostitution and the running of a brothel with girls as young as 12 years old. That trial continues there. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
We kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Welcome back. This is still Newsroom. The 2014 calendar year was arguably one of the most devastating in South Africa's labour market history, with industrial action across many sectors amounting to billions of rands in lost wages and revenue. What are the prospects for wage increases in 2015? With gross domestic product growth expected to remain subdued for the year, due partly to electricity supply constraints and mitigated only slightly by an oil price tailwind. Labour market stability will come under increased scrutiny as the economy continues to stumble along. A stable year could result in better growth, while another 2014 could be devastating, with majority of industrial actions related to compensation. Taking into account upcoming wage negotiations in more detail, we ask what the economy can afford in terms of wage increases. We are joined by Labour analyst Chere Monaisa, who is also a researcher of labour market transformation at Naledi. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
2014 was a tumultuous year. It was a tough year for South Africa, and we're still feeling the after effects of it. Labour lost 11 billion rand in salary, over 24 billion of revenue for companies. South Africa can't afford this again. What are the prospects? What's the outlook for this year?
Well, at least the good news is that the biggest sector is not going into negotiations this year, which was manufacturing. That is where we felt the biggest impact in 2012 and 2014 when the manufacturing sector was on strike. And last year when AMCU is still new and is still flexing its muscle. And I think this year things are a bit more settled because of those changes. And also NUM has gone back to reorganizing and focusing on worker issues. So if you're paying attention now, they are raising their demands and they are releasing statements out there that they are not a sweetheart union, they are not a business union. So you can expect that the mining sector is going to be where we should expect a lot of volatility this year.
Especially gold mining, if I'm seeing it correctly. Yeah. What should happen, or what would you like to see happen to bring stability there, and what can we afford?
Well, if you're talking about the mining sector, there's the mineral sector, that's where I think it deals, unfortunately, it goes into macroeconomic policies where you need all sectors at play. Because we saw with the big strikes at Marikana, where we saw the split between NUM and AMCU, but people who were still effectively NUM members, where socio-economic issues were brought onto the negotiation table, were brought onto the reasons why workers were demanding higher wages. Yeah. So for mining, it's going to be a long-term struggle, and it's going to depend on employers and unions and government working in concert to try and make some concessions to say, at least for this year, let's try as best as we can. Let's be concessionary instead of confrontational and holding on to our extreme positions.
You talk about concessions, and this in the public sector is where I'd like to move the conversation. There we've got ongoing wage negotiations. COSATU-affiliated unions have threatened to down tools. They've revised their offer from 15% to 10%. Government have downgraded their offer from 5% to 4.8%. Do we see a strike looming there, and what would the effect of that be?
Now, from the reports that are out there, it seems like we are heading for a strike unless government rapidly announces, because the trade unions, for example, SABC is complaining that they have not even been met by the ministries that are concerned with negotiating with them. So if they know they're already not talking, it's already poisoning the negotiating environment. And I think we may find that the public sector may be one of the more contested areas, because I just found out recently that even in Germany, the public sector is going on strike after years of wage restraint.
Yeah.
So how easy is it for government to convince the trade unions, especially if it seems they're already negotiating from a bad faith, as the way the trade unions are seeing it?
What about the prospects in the private sector? There's again talk of double digits. Is that realistic?
It's not realistic, but it's necessary. It's a bargaining strategy, but then at the same time, there are echoes of the need to improve wages generally. So as a researcher, when you look at it, we're finding more and more we cannot look at wages in isolation. That's why both NUMSA and NUM are talking about going to communities to make sure communities understand the workers' issues and also to understand more community issues and how they impact on at workers, because unemployment unfortunately affects those very few who are employed.
You talk about that. What about the mood amongst the workers? The cost of living seems to be spiraling out of control. We've got a few levy increase coming again. What are the workers saying? Are they at a point where we say enough is enough?
That one, those are concerns that mainly, I mean, the news report after the budget speech, it was felt that it's only the middle class that's being hit. But unfortunately for your average worker, we've been talking about the petrol prices going back up. There's been drought in South Africa, and the maize price is going to be affected. That's where your average workers in the private sector are going to get most affected. So if we do not start to see those strikes, more strikes and higher wage demands this year, they're going to come out at the beginning of next year when other wage negotiations period reopen.
Well, I thank you for joining us. It's an interesting picture, and let's hope let's hope sanity prevails at the end of the day, because that's what South Africa's economy needs. I thank you for joining us. Labour analyst Jere Monaisa joining us, giving us his views on, well, if there is a protracted strike season looming once again. Well, we've just taken another wicket, so the UAE 118 for 5, chasing 342, so South Africa should be closing out that match rather shortly. Now, let's have a look at your tweets. What are you Twitter about? No wind at all tonight. Hope it stays this way. Firefighters need all the help they can get. Any chance of rain? Asks the roaming giraffe. Talking about the fires in Stellenbosch there. There you have a picture. It says, there's the house, there's the fire coming down the mountain. I know it all too well. Jonkershoek fire. Tineke van Zyl, well, lovely picture there. There you see the scale of it at night. Jason Crew Brown says, I caught a time lapse of the Jonkershoek fire above the Berg River. Says about to, let me see, valley video to come, but this is a stack of the images. Wonderful images. Looks really beautiful, but I can tell you if you're living there, as most of my family members are, they're not very happy about it. Chantal Kerr says, ominous smoke cloud bellowing above the Takara farms from the adjacent Jonkershoek Valley. Talking about the Jonkershoek fire, or the Stellenbosch fire as it's now known. There you can see the ash cloud that's moving. It's a smoke cloud, really. We've seen ash rain yesterday. Some of my family members sending me pictures. Look at my car, it's covered in ash. Unfortunately, just going to have to wash it, Lynn, if you're listening. Anyhow, you're watching Newsroom here on SABC. Let's move on. The rand fell to a staggering 13-year low against the dollar this week after investors sold off emerging markets. Currencies ahead of the heightened expectations that there will be an interest rate hike in the United States by June of this year. Meanwhile, the dollar rose to an 11-year high against the world's major currencies. Now, joining us today is the head of market and economic research at Investment Solutions, Lesiba Motata, who will be here to give us his views on what is concerning for some. Are you concerned about this 13-year low against the dollar that came out this week?
It is coming in a time that is not opportune for our country. We had this relief from low oil prices that has been sapped by taxes, and now the rand.
Few levies.
Yeah, few levies. So that the rand is adding to this inflationary situation we have. If you looked at the inflation and you took out, you looked at just it excluding electricity, food, etc., it remained elevated. So with a weak rand, you're going to see that the impact of inflation is going to come back to the table for conversation, which means that as you've seen throughout the globe, central banks are cutting rates. That's not an option now in our country for that reason.
Now, Lesiba, I read a report, and as we do, we read all kinds of snippets. I read a report that said more than 50% of the South African consumer is debt stressed. That means they are almost 3 months in arrears of paying their debts, and we are well over indebted as well. Within this context, how does that play out?
Yeah, so it's problematic. In fact, in the speech, the minister highlighted that, for example, in some sectors, in the public sector, people are cashing in the pension in order to pay down debt. It's a problem, and the middle class is stressed. The taxes haven't helped. Unfortunately, where we are now, we cannot grow faster than we have seen, around 2.5% this year. So we're going to have weak growth, and we're going to have situations of our current account widen further. Because that oil price has gone up and the rand has depreciated. So you're going to get a situation where the current account remains under pressure, will cause the rand to be under pressure, which will mean inflation is elevated, which will mean interest rates can go down. The hawkish rhetoric that came out of the SAB may be reinstated, although not now, perhaps later on. But if the US hike rates in June, that will also be another factor that could add to tightening policy.
We see pictures here of unemployment, employable men and women sitting on the streets looking for piecemeal jobs, others collecting recyclable material, petrol price increases, and so forth. I want to look at the outlook, and I always ask you when you're here, the magic pill. There isn't a magic pill. I always get abused by the green people that I'm pro-fracking. But fracking can add that boost to our economy that can see us fight the high levels of unemployment, can't it? How do you view this?
Yeah, so there's clever people that have made studies, and they've shown that there could be environmental harm that can be done from that strategy.
Do we save the fynbos, or do we save the people of South Africa? Is the question, Lesiba.
So there was cost benefits, and what you find is that if you were to do that, it will contribute to lowering unemployment, it and many other things. The only problem is that our policies now, they're not pro-growth, right? We hike taxes. We still haven't made decisions on what should happen around the Karoo in that front. And we will perpetually be in a low-growth environment. I'm afraid to say that the situation we find unemployment being high, it's going to live with us for a while.
That's a rather sobering thought on this note. But let's talk about what we need to do then to arrest this year. What measures do we need to put in place to deal with the rand, firstly?
See, the rand is left for the markets to be determined, so the SAB can't intervene to make it stronger. But if you looked at how, if you just value the rand on any measure, you'll find that it's excessively oversold. In other words, it's too weak.
Yeah.
And it needs to pull back into a fair value. And if you just did that, you'll find that the rand will have to pull back from where it's from where it's at, unless we get a growth crisis, or we get labor unrest that actually eat out on the growth outlook on our country. But on the median, on the middle ground, what should happen is it should pull back from where it's been oversold.
Now, the middle classes are complaining, and they are constrained, and they say they're being squeezed. What's your advice to especially the middle classes here in South Africa?
Yeah, so we can't add more debt from where we are. We need to be paying down debt, because if you get a crisis in our country, and think of what happened in Russia. The Monetary Policy Committee met in one time, and they hiked rates to 6.5% in one meeting. So if you get a crisis in our country, the rand goes to 14, and it forces the monetary policy authorities to move. You may actually even get higher interest rates in an environment of higher taxes. And that is not very good for those who are in debt.
Well, so pay your debt. That's what they always say. Save money and pay your debt. Thank you, Lesiba. That's Lesiba Mothato, who is the head of market and economic research at Investment Solutions, always giving his sobering thoughts. Let's take a look now at your tweet of the day. It comes from Ms. Moeng. Death will get you all the love you never got while you were still alive. That is, of course, talking, I think, in relation to Flaba, who passed away earlier in the week. Yes, only the young die good, they say. Let's take a look at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page. Gauteng police have issued a reward of up to 100,000 rand for any information that could lead to the arrest of suspects who mugged an SABC crew on the Barry Hertzog Avenue Bridge on Tuesday evening. Then President Jacob Zuma has yet to give his oral reply on questions from last year. During the president's oral reply session yesterday, the EFF insisted that he should answer outstanding questions from 2014 before answering new questions. Then you can also read more about the British military healthcare worker who was tested positive for Ebola while working in Sierra Leone. Airport officials there said the patient would be flown home overnight. You can find all of those stories, a whole lot more, on Newsroom's Facebook page. You can also go to sabc.co.za for all the latest updates all the time. And a quick update before we go to a break. UAE have lost another wicket, 125 for 6. AB de Villiers have taken 2 wickets. Can you believe it? Let's take a break. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News.
Art is a personal expression that evokes a flame from within.
Street art, it's a vast concept.
Dancing is one of the main art forms on the streets of Africa. Regardless of how it is done, the streets remain expressive. A passionate artist in the central business district of Johannesburg.
Yeah, I've been doing this it's been 7 years or 8 years now.
Brains lost control on what to do then. Words dispute in the mouth of a woman.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, all of us are guilty of complaining about stress at some point. Now, on that note, Bloomberg scored 74 countries around the world for their stressed out factor. On the research conducted, 2 African countries came out on top. Nigeria in first place, followed by us here in South Africa in second place. With the 7 variables that were looked at, South Africa came in the top in income inequality, we know that, and also life expectancy, sharing that with Nigeria. Countries like Norway and Luxembourg were named the least stressed nations in the world. Now, to talk to us about why we are so stressed, we are joined by clinical psychologist Johan van Rooyen, live from Cape Town. Good morning, Johan. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Ruben. It's a pleasure.
Why are we so stressed, Johan?
Well, personally, when looking at the report, it's that high levels of income inequality and the unemployment rate of 25%. Now, if people are uncertain, high levels of uncertainty leads to anxiety or stress. So in South Africa, there's lots of uncertainty at the moment. There's uncertainty about the political future, uncertainty about the economy. So systemically, there's uncertainty. And then personally as well, people are struggling. People are sitting with lots of uncertainty about their own lives. The divorce rate in South Africa is high. So at my practice, I see from the ages of 7 years and older people dealing with that uncertainty, which leads to anxiety disorders and stress.
The divorce rate is high, the suicide rate is high here in South Africa. Is it time for us to look for some intervention with the stress? It seems that it's bubbling out on the streets at times with the kind of road rage and racist incidents and the like that we're seeing.
People definitely need to be more accountable. I think it starts on a personal level. Luckily, South Africans are quite resilient. You can see it on social media. When people are stressed in South Africa, I think as a defense mechanism, people make jokes. But I think personally, people need to take responsibility. You need to know your own stress levels. And if you get to a point where you do realize that you're very stressed, you need to go and speak to a doctor or go and speak to a counselor or psychologist. systemically as well, you need to, I think luckily there's interventions happening in the country. You see big interventions like random acts of kindness, where people actually start making a difference. And I think things like that will definitely make a difference and will help.
Stress and depression. What's the difference between the two, and how do you deal with them?
Well, stress and depression, I prefer to talk about anxiety and depression. Anxiety can definitely lead to depression if it's unattended. Depression is if you get to a point in your life where you believe that you have no future. Depression is when you actually feel so low that it can lead to suicidal ideation or suicide. So anxiety is something that you feel in your body. People get anxious, sweaty palms, heartbeat, where their functioning is compromised. So the one can definitely lead to the other.
Now, this week we saw an incident on social media where one of my colleagues was mugged live on camera. Yes. I asked him, why didn't you ask the guy who mugged you a few questions? He thought he didn't think it was funny. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, crime. Does crime in the South African context play a big role with regards to anxiety and stress? And is it overplayed in the media?
I don't think it's overplayed at all. I think, once again, the uncertainty, not feeling safe is a big thing. When you drive in your car and you're not feeling safe, when you're bombarded by newspapers every day and you read of murders and crime, then it definitely leads to uncertainty and if not feeling safe, which will definitely lead to higher stress levels.
Was there anything positive for us as South Africans that came out of this Bloomberg report, Johan?
Sure. I don't know. When I actually looked at the report, my stress levels did increase as well. So for me, there was not much that was positive about it. I think for me, the shocking part is the unemployment rate and then the life expectancy of just 58 years. So it means that people need to be more accountable. People need to start looking after themselves health-wise so that we can get that up.
Well, Johan, I'm going to try and implement some of that in my life. I don't know. I don't always know if one should follow through with these reports. It is another report after all. Thank you very much, Johan van Rooyen, clinical psychologist, talking about a Bloomberg report that South Africa, the second most stressed out society in the world. I could have told you that. Anyhow. Now, a love of music, a sense of community and sharing, and some modern technology have forged a friendship between two groups that otherwise would never have met. This unlikely friendship is turning out to be mutually beneficial and has people talking on two continents. Richard Newton has more on this story.
100 female prisoners in a state facility in Ohio, USA. Over a dozen kids with life-shortening illnesses in a hospice in Bloemfontein, RSA. Add a couple of computers, the internet, and the two are connected, in more ways than one. It all began when the woman started a choir in prison and, in exchange for free singing lessons, made toys and clothes for the kids thousands of miles away at Sunflower House. The choir then wanted to sing for the kids.
Wide, deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide, deep and wide.
Wanted to sing for their new best friends. And an amazing friendship was born. Many of the women in the prison are mothers, some who have lost their kids. Many of the kids here at Sunflower House have lost their moms. Their musical interludes are therapeutic for both. In Ohio, pictures of the kids at Sunflower House adorn the colourfully painted walls, and during the monthly Skype sessions, the ladies can see those kids clutching toys made especially for them. And during the singing sessions, there's a lot of love in the room. In the greater scheme of things, this isn't really breaking news, but at a time where conflict, war and hatred dominates the news cycle, while it's not obvious, it's a reminder that there is still some goodness left in the world. Richard Newton, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
We'll be live in Bloemfontein tomorrow to take that story a little bit further. Yes, we're stressed out in South Africa. You saw that earlier. we're stressed out. So we need to sing a little bit more, and we need to be nice to each other a little bit. And this is something that I think finally we've got something that maybe helps you to de-stress a little bit. The further you hit it, the less you stress. The Quantum World Long Driving Competition kicks off in South Africa tomorrow. The competition will be in international team format and will be hosted at the Wanderers Golf Club here in Gauteng. South Africa will start the tournament against Canada. Now, to tell us more about the format, the rules of engagement, South Africa's top-ranked player, Jason Cook, South African captain Gerard Kutsia, and he's joined by his counterpart, Ryan Wilkins from Canada. As you can see, they all look very, very beautiful here in their fantastically colourful clothing. Gerard, you're the South African number one.
Yeah.
Tell us about the format tomorrow, but actually, I'm more interested in the South African colours that you're wearing. I know you signed a deal with Loudmouth Clothing, and this is the South African colours you're going to be wearing, is that right?
Yeah, that is it. So the guys from Loudmouth have been absolutely wonderful. They came to the party and they said they're going to dress us the way that long drivers are in terms of character and play, which is the bold, colourful guys of golf. You know, these guys are the lunatic Olympians that hit it a mile and they don't exactly keep quiet on the tee box. So Loudmouth just fits in perfectly. So a big shout out to them for dressing the South African team.
Ryan, you're from Canada. I'm sure the South Africans have made you feel very welcome here this week.
Absolutely. This is my second time in South Africa, and I'm happy that they've invited me back, and this is going to be a great event this weekend. We're looking forward to it.
Tell us about the format. I'm sure you've been at the venue. What do you think of the venue, and what can people expect, I would think?
Yeah, the venue is a great venue. We're right on the first hole at Wanderers there. It goes out to over 500 meters. Nice and wide, and I think we'll see a few balls over 400 meters on Friday night, so come out and check it out. It should be good.
It is at altitude, so, I mean, I could hit it down that hill on the 10th there, almost 400 meters. So you're going to have to hit it 500 meters to impress us here in South Africa.
We'll have to get you a pair of pants like these guys.
Matt, tell us, you're involved managing the South African team, running the format. What can the people of South Africa expect from this? It's a lot of fun, I suppose.
It is. And basically, to put it to the public, what long drive is the T20 of golf. It's exciting, it's hot, it's full of energy. The way we're dressed, you can see the colors. It's full of action. It's non-stop on the tee box, smoking your drives and having an absolute blast.
Now, long driving is gaining popularity now around the world. There are a lot of golf clubs, a lot of improvement, I would think, in technology and the like, and the ball travels a lot further now. Do you see the sport going maybe into a sort of Olympic scenario in the years to come? Is that the talk that you guys are at least having?
It's always been a talk about trying to make it an Olympic sport, and right now we're progressing the sport. It's getting bigger and bigger every year. We have more competitors come out, new faces coming out, competing in the sport, and it's only going to grow. So maybe one day we will see it in the Olympics. Who knows?
What do you think, Gerrit? Maybe we should bring the Olympics here to South Africa and we can hit the ball 500 meters at altitude. That would make them sit up and take notice. Huh?
It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? I mean, South Africa lives for big international sporting events, and here from Quantum, we're now in the position to bring major international sporting events to South Africa. You know, there's athletes from the US and Canada and Europe and all over the show. In terms of long drive, yes, it's wonderful. The world of sport is just going faster and shorter and more action-filled all the time. We see it in T20 and cricket. We see it in sevens and rugby, where it's almost an entirely different makeup of athlete. You know, the psychology is there. I like to say these are the 100-meter athletes of golf as opposed to the marathon athletes. And the guys are big. The guys pitch at a rugby field further than the top-hitting pros on the PGA Tour. So it's just magically entertaining.
That's amazing. I don't quite know if it's the endurance athletes of sport, because these are big, strong guys that hit it a mile. But Matty, tell us about the format. South Africa playing, I think, starts at 4 o'clock tomorrow, playing Canada. How does it then play out, the rest of the quantum?
What we've decided to do to keep the energy going is we're going to run a triple play format. So it's going to be 3 rounds, round robin, South Africa going to Canada, alternating shots off the launch pad, and they're going to be going at that for 3 rounds. The total number of drives per each set from the longest of the team then gets tallied together, and then the winning team gets announced at the end of the day.
Well, guys, it's a fantastic format. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very colourful. As you see some of the pictures there, that you won't see on a golf course, I tell you for sure. It's a lot of fun. It's a fantastic format. It starts at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon at the Wanderers Golf Club here in Johannesburg. And here in Joburg, we always like to go bigger than everywhere else. So we ask you guys to come down to the Wanderers tomorrow. We guarantee you'll see some things that you have never seen before. We all know the motto here in Johannesburg is eat or be eaten. So this is what it's all about. It's the Quantum Long Drive Test match. It's Canada against South Africa tomorrow, 4 o'clock at the Wanderers. Before we go, let's just have a look at our tweets. I think South Africa, they've got the UAE 6 down. Batted earlier, AB was out for, I think, 99. Are we having a look at the tweets? Are we going? We're having a look at the tweets, yes. 26 is hit by de Villiers this World Cup, the most by any batsman in a single tournament. Hayden hit 18. And thank you for the stats, Usman. We can find that on Radio 2000 as well. The tipsman says, AB getting wickets. One day he'll bowl himself in the finals. I think so. Noko Masamola says, I think the Cox confidence been hit out of the park for 6. Playing him in the semis, well, I think in the quarters will be a massive risk. Those are some of your views. Of course, the game is still on at the moment. UAE 157 for 6, chasing 342. They will never get there. But we've got some other scenarios playing out, of course, here in Johannesburg. Tomorrow, the Quantum Longest Drive competition starts at 4 o'clock. I'm going to be there to go and have a look. These are the live pictures incoming now from the Cape Town in Wellington, where that match is taking place. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing a very colourful event tomorrow at the Wanderers Golf Club, not Cricket Stadium. It's right next door. Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show then repeats itself at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast the following morning at 5 a.m. We also stream live on YouTube at that time, and if you miss it, it's available all day long on demand on our YouTube channel. You've been watching Newsroom. This is SABC News. We love it in the morning.